Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Susan Kudalakis, and I'm Marketing Manager here at Progress. Welcome to today's Ask Me Anything, Migrating from Classic to Progress Application Server for OpenEdge. Before we jump in, I wanted to quickly introduce you to your speakers for today. Mike Banks. Mike is Senior Principal Engineer. His contributions span the OpenEdge product set, and he's been a frequent speaker at Exchange and PUG conferences. He's also an adjunct lecturer at Bentley University. And next, we have Roy Ellis, Senior Product Owner. Roy has worked for Progress for over 25 years. After starting in technical support, Roy moved to the WebSpeed development team. Since then, he has helped to deliver many products and features, including most recently the new Progress application server for OpenEdge, which we're going to talk about today. Over a year ago, Roy moved to the product management team. He enjoys working with customers and presenting at many customer events. Welcome, Mike and Roy.
Hello, this is Roy, and Mike is here also. Say hi, Mike.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Before we get started, we just have a few slides where we want to go over why we decided to move away from the classic app server and move to the Progress application server for OpenEdge, also known PAS for OpenEdge or PasoE for short, and why we decided to do this. And we've had this presentation before, and it's always why PasoE. So we're going to tag team this. Mike will do one, I'll do one, and we'll see which one is first. Mike, I think that's yours.
Sounds great. Yeah, so I think so. This first slide's about application modernization, and modernization is really I think that's the overarching reason that we did PAS for OpenEdge. There were certain things about the old architecture that just made modern applications difficult or impossible to do. So with PasoE, you can handle all the modern UIs. Plus, we made it so that you could use the old UIs as well. So the old character UI is still supported, but it opens it up for all the modern UIs, .NET UIs, Java, JavaScript, applications that use HTML. And it allows fully RESTful sorts of applications, which some RESTful things were really difficult with the old architecture. We also still have support for SOAP. To me, though, the most exciting new architectural piece, though, is the web handler architecture. The web handler architecture opens up a lot more opportunities for real RESTful applications. It's super simple, gives you full control over the application request, over the HTTP requests, and it's all using the ABL that we know and love.
All right. Excellent. Next slide. That must be mine, right?
That's yours.
Okay. So we're talking about scalability and being cloud ready. The classic app server could not scale that well. It was a problem. People were having trouble with running a lot of things on it. And it did not run in the cloud at all because of our name server ability. The load balancing name server just didn't work in the cloud. So we decided that we needed something that could do that. PasoE is it, and what it allowed us to do, becoming our own little web server and web application built in, is it allowed us to use industry standard load balancers, right? Hardware or software. So now you can load balance like you would any other application. It also supports the load balancer health check, which means, hey, if I'm running 5 or 6 machines in a load balancer and one of the machines starts to have trouble, the load balancer can take that and pull it out of the system and put a new PasoE into the system without a customer ever seeing any downtime. And for the same reason, PasoE supports containerization, so Docker. PasoE was the first product to be added as a Docker container out there for the world to use, again, making it more cloud ready and scalable. And just as a proof that we could scale with PasoE early on, we did a test where we ran 10,000 concurrent users in AWS. So that's 10,000 concurrent users running a PasoE application, the ATM, which we've had for years and years and years to test performance. And we set that up and ran in Amazon. So we had 10,000 concurrent units running in this application. And the hardest part was not getting PasoE to work. It was getting JMeter to push that many requests at a time and adjusting the database to handle that many requests. So, so we really feel that PasoE is very scalable and is ready for the cloud.
So another big motivator for the new architecture was security, and security was designed into PasoE from the beginning. In fact, I could probably mention that the lead architect for this project was actually our main security expert in progress. The new architecture is all based on industry standards. I know with the older architecture, we kind of left things like authentication and authorization. We left that to our customers to figure out. But with PasoE OpenEdge, security is built in, has support for single sign-on protocols like OAuth 2 and SAML, and it uses all the industry standard components like JSON Web Tokens. We also have our own OpenEdge client principal object that ties everything together. It allows authentication and authorization that goes all the way from the top UI all the way down to the database level. So it's really extremely powerful. And of course, it's got that wonderful, reliable database on the back end.
Right, and it's true that, is it true that the Spring security happens before you even get to the application, happens at the very front end of this, right?
That's right, and that, we've actually done a bunch of talks just about the security component, but it does lots of really nice things like detecting attacks and preventing, the normal, the security hacks that are so prevalent these days. And that all happens before it ever gets to your ABL business logic, which is really nice.
Excellent. All right, let's see what my next slide is. Okay, so let's talk again about scalability and usability. One of the things we wanted to do with PasoE was we wanted to use less resources, right? Well, there's scalability across several machines, but then there's scalability on just one machine. And early on, again, we wanted to prove that PasoE could surpass the classic app servers. So the very top line there is scalability. On a single machine, and the same machine, we could run 221 client connections at the same time using Classic. With PasoE, we were able to run 1,300. And that's just because the multi-session agent uses less resources, and the whole package uses less resources. On the same machine, if we ran the same load, Classic would use 10 CPUs, PasoE would use 5. Memory was down, again, because we share memory structures and things in the multi-session agent. And the transactions were up in the database if it was shared memory, again, because the multi-session agent handles transaction inside the database when you're in shared memory. Don't look at this and say, wow, I'm going to get 7 times more throughput. Again, this is just transactions at the database. What we found is client performance and web speed performance round trip can be faster, can be slower. It depends on your application. If it's highly locked into the AVM and doing a lot of ABL, you may not see much of a change. If your problem was locking in the database and your shared memory, you might see a change. So, but the biggest thing here is we use a ton less resources, and that makes it easier to use smaller machines or use the same size machine and get more throughput through on the same machine.
So kind of continuing with what Roy was saying, on the left-hand side of this slide is kind of a snapshot of the way things used to be. We always had an admin server. If you were doing load balancing, you had a name server. You maybe needed some adapters, so you may have been running the AIA the web speed adapter or the REST adapter in a separate Tomcat instance, for example. And then if you had different state management you had to start up an app server for state aware, stateless, state free, and not even in this picture is web speed. So you may have needed another app server instance for doing web speed. In addition to that, each of the agents was a single session agent. So an agent could only handle a single session at a time. So you had to have as many agents as you predicted concurrent sessions. So that meant you needed a lot of different processes. On the right-hand side, you can see the paths for OpenEdge architecture, much simpler. The adapters are essentially integrated as transports. What used to be the broker is also integrated as the session manager. And then probably the most important thing is now the agent is a multi-session agent. So it can handle multiple concurrent requests at the same time. And those requests can simultaneously be state managed or state free, as well as web speed requests. So all of those requests can be handled concurrently within a single multi-session agent.
Okay.
Let's see, I didn't say anything about the migration there, but the migration is in most cases is fairly straightforward. We tried to make things as backwards compatible as possible, including web speed applications. So fairly straightforward for most customers.
Right, and because some of the tools and properties files changed, we added a migration tool in 11.7.4 to make it even easier. So
yes, that's right. That's right.
Okay, now I can go forward, right?
Yes. Yes. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. The next thing was monitoring. Everybody knows that what was the one thing you had in the classic app server to get information on it was ASB man query, and it gave you some very perfunctory information. And that was pretty much all you had. And there were complaints about that. And in the classic app server, that would have been very hard to fix. However, in PasoE, we decided to fix that. So we built everything on JMX beans inside of Tomcat, and that allowed us to give you all kinds of ways to get information, more information than you're ever going to need in most cases. So you can get it using the OEJMX, which is a script-based thing. So you can just run scripts and gather the data that you want. There's a JConsole part of Java, which allows you to walk through everything. There's a REST API if it's much easier to get this information through a REST API. And we've since added Swagger documentation. So not only do you have the REST API you can use and get things over HTTP, but you can also go and practice and look at it and get documentation using Swagger. And actually try it, which I think is the best part of the Swagger documentation. We still ship with the product Tomcat monitoring. So if you use it in Tomcat to get information on the front end, that's still there for you. But you can also get that information again through the OEJMX. Of course, OE management and OE Explorer still work. It will give you specific information and allow you to manage it in a specific way, but it won't give you access to all the things that are available in the other monitorings. And the nice thing is the OEJMX, the JMX beans, and the REST API, they integrate very well with third-party monitoring tools. Very early on, I set up and did a Nagios presentation using PasoE, where I could get a whole bunch of information on the PasoE and drop it into this Nagios tool, which a lot of people are using. And because these things are all standard-based, it will work with almost any third-party monitoring tool that's out there. So you can build your own, you can roll your own, you can take this data and put it in, I don't know, an OpenEdge database maybe, or you can go ahead and use these third-party tools. So there are so many ways to monitor PasoE and make sure that things are running well in your application that we think that's another reason why it's head and shoulders above the classic app server. Last slide, I think, Mike, yours?
Yeah, so there are a number of new features in PasoE, and I think most of these are released 12 sorts of features. But one of the things we have performance profiling, so server-side performance profiling. So if you're trying to make your ABL code more efficient, your business logic more efficient, there's a tool to do that. There's also a leak detector tool to help you get rid of the places where your application is not freeing up objects. We also have the health scanner, and I think Roy mentioned this a little bit. One of the primary uses of the health scanner is to decide whether or not to take a PasoE instance out of service if, for example, you're running in the cloud. But it also provides a wealth of other information. There's also some UI tools that hook into the health scanner as well. There's also a newer feature, agent self-management, that decides when and how to allocate sessions on the agents. So it does this automatic scaling. Again, helps with resource usage and helps with performance as well. And then we're making a push to provide better support for CI and CD. So we've done some application deployment packaging work. So you can actually, for example, export an ABL, a full ABL application from a working instance, and then import that full ABL application somewhere else. So I know that distributing applications, we've kind of left that to our customers as well. But we're trying to remedy that and come up with some standard packaging for applications, for services, and in the future for web apps. So lots of good reasons, lots of motivators for the new architecture, and lots of good reasons to switch to PaaS for OpenEdge.
Okay, and as promised, just a short slide deck. Why don't I stop sharing and turn my camera on so you can see me? And maybe Mike will join us too.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm here. I'm going to help you guys with the Q&A because we have a lot of people on. So while we're giving people time to type their questions into the questions panel, I got a couple of questions over email. So why don't we start with one of those, and then we can jump back and forth between the two. So, okay, so there's a question on databases on Linux. So the question is we have our databases on Linux. How is it, or is it better to set up, deploy, and run PasoE on Linux to these databases, making use of shared memory compared to PasoE on Windows?
It's a good question. I think there's a little bit of a performance improvement by using shared memory, but by using the database as a server, there's a little bit better reliability, maybe.
Right. There's the scalability, right? If you're trying to keep your app server and your database on the same machine, the only way you can scale is to get a bigger machine.
Right.
So if you have it running either PasoE running on another Windows machine or another Linux machine or in a Docker container, then you can add as many of those as you need to scale as need also happens. And then as Mike said, if something happens, if one of those app servers starts to have problems or a machine goes down, if you have it set up that way, your application keeps running.
Yes.
So yes, there might be a slight speed degradation, although I've had customers who have gone from running the app server on the same machine as the database to moving remotely. And I think in one customer's case, there was only one program that they saw a significant change in speed in. And when they went in and looked at it, they were able to correct it with some ABL fixes. So it's definitely something. Don't just say, oh, it's only going to run at its best in shared memory, because you may not see a difference if you run it client server over the network. Yeah,
it really depends on your database, how things are organized in your database, and how chatty it is between the business logic and the database.
Right.
All right, so we have a lot of questions. I was right.
That's good. That's good. That's why
We're going to
we're
stay until they're all answered, right?
Or we run out of time, one or the other. So there's a question about 12.2, 12.3, and removing the classic app server. So I'm going to lump those two together. Will everything we need be available in 12.2, the LTS, or will we need to upgrade to 12.3 later? And then the follow-on question is, will you eventually be removing support for the classic app server?
Okay, so the first one is the classic app server is no longer supported in 12. We had to do that because we just couldn't support both, and continuing to add features to the classic app server did not make sense because it would be very difficult to do a lot of these things in the classic app server. So the classic app server is supported in 11.7 and will be for many years, but when you move to 12, you'll have to move to to PasoE. Secondly, 12.2 is what 12.2 is. It's an LTS, it's a long-term release. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to add new features there. We're going to keep it very stable. We're going to fix bugs. We're going to keep up with security issues. This will be a very stable release for you that you can build on and use for many years in your customer deployment. 12.3, 12.4, the non-LTS, those are to give you an idea of what we're working on for the future, right? You can grab those, you can get the new features, you can start looking at them, and if you're comfortable, you can move to 12.3. But know that 12.3 is only supported until 12.4 comes out. So it's a way to keep up to pace and up to speed. But if you want to stay on 12.2 for your customers so that they're stable, that's why you want to do it. And the next LTS will be out in early 2023. So there's sort of a progression there. You can see all the new stuff. You can play with it. You can use it if you want. But know that 12.2 is stable, and that's what we want it to be, is stable and secure. And you'll get all of these rolled up into the next LTS. Did you want to add anything to that, Mike?
I'm glad there's a product manager on the call. I get all the releases blend together for me.
So here's another question on memory usage. How do you keep memory usage low for each PAS instance? Is a separate Tomcat instance is running? I think that was two different things.
That's true, but what used to be supported by multiple agents is now supported by a single agent, right? So typically the amount of system resources used is far less than in the classic. If you just think about spinning up 100 agents and the amount of memory that 100 agents would take, as opposed to just a single PasoE agent that can handle 100 simultaneous requests, it usually is much better.
Right, and you don't have to have one single PasoE instance where if you had 3 different applications you were running in the classic app server, you can put all 3 of those in a single Tomcat instance, right? Yeah, so they would all have their own ProPass, they would all have their own security, they could have their own database connections. So they're really separated, 3 different applications all in that one PasoE. So you're saving on that too. Now there may be reasons, right? There may be reasons to run separate ones, but if you can run them all together, then you're even saving more memory.
Yeah, that one agent might be bigger than a typical classic agent because it's allocating more objects and it's going to take more memory, but it's not going to be 100 times bigger for 100 simultaneous sessions.
Right.
So I hope you don't mind me going back and asking questions to the ones that we just asked about, the LTS versus the 12.3 and 4. Someone just asked if we're going to add features from 12.3 or 12.4 back into 12.2. So maybe Roy, that's for you.
Yeah, so the answer is no. And that's simply because we want the LTS to be stable, right? Adding features is always risky, right? You're making a lot of code changes. And we don't want to affect somebody who's got their application up and running to put a feature in that might destabilize their application. So that's what the LTS is for. It's stable. It's not going to get new features, and the new features will come out in the non-LTS coming out. So 12.3, 12.4 will have new features in it, and these will all be rolled up into the next LTS.
So there's a follow-up question. I think you already answered it about the next LTS. You said 2023?
Yes, the early 2023 is our expected date, with all the caveats that, hey, what could happen? I don't know, a worldwide pandemic. So that's our plan right now.
Yes. Okay. So there's a question on security. If you want to define a security to an instance on PAS, how would it be used for an instance moved from Classic? I hope that makes sense.
I'm not sure it does make sense.
Okay. Let me see
right.
if he's
the security and is stuff you had to roll yourself in the Classic app server, right? So.
Oh, I see.
So if you move into PasoE, especially if you're using database usernames in a database, then PasoE has the OE realm option, right? Am I saying this right, Mike? Go ahead.
Yes. That's probably the way you would do it. Is you use the new OE realm that allows you basically to use your same ABL code on the back end. So yeah, if you do want to, instead of moving to the new Spring security, if you wanted to bring your old security implementation over, you could do that with OE realm.
Okay, there are a couple of follow-up comments. So maybe this will help explain it, because I'm reading through and I'm trying to read through. So the Classic instance had no security, and now on 12 would need to have security.
Well,
you can run fully open if you want an unsecured application, but most people want some sort of security in front of their applications, especially these days, and especially if the application is internet facing or web facing, it's essential to have some sort of security. That said, it's a simple thing to disable all the security. If you're running on a protected intranet and you trust everybody in the building.
Right. And that's the default, right? Allow everybody is the default when PasoE is shipped.
Allow everybody is the default for the development server, but allow nobody is the default for the production server. The production server wants intentional configuration, right? So the production server is as secure as possible to begin with, and then you have to decide how and where you want to open it up. The development server is just the opposite. The development server is designed so that you can get things up and running as fast as possible. So it's just wide open.
The nice thing about PasoE too, though, is if you don't have security now and you want it, and you already have, LDAP or Microsoft AD, you can fairly quickly hook into that, and you automatically have security built into PasoE by using those things you may already have in your business.
Yeah. And it should be much easier to configure and maintain too.
All right, the next question I have is about a migration tool. So either Roy or Mike, you mentioned a migration tool introduced in 11.7.4. What's its name and where can people find it?
PAS PropConf, is that what it was called?
PAS Property Converter, PAS PropConf, yes.
Yeah, it basically takes an old ubroker.properties and converts it into an OpenEdge.properties, which is what is used by PasoE. And
it should be found in the $DLC bin directory.
I think so. The really nice thing about it is that the properties file that it creates comes with a ton of commentary. It generates lots of information about why and how those values were converted. So then you can read through that and make good decisions about your application and your installation as well.
Okay. Does PAS support REST in combination with XML using HTTPS?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd recommend those web handlers that I was talking about. That web handler architecture is just incredibly powerful, and you can do a fully RESTful application. I think really for the first time in OpenEdge with the web handlers, because it gives you access to all the pieces of the HTTP request and gives you full control over the response and the content type. So if it's XML, you can handle that perfectly. In fact, we've done that quite a bit, quite a lot.
Okay, so the next question is it possible to have deployment and production PasoE on the same server, or do you need different instances?
So my first thing is what I always say, is having development and production on the same machine is wicked scary. You know, I'm sure your developers are going to try to do the best they can, but I've heard horror stories of developers picking the wrong database, deleting the wrong thing. So from a security point of view, I get very scared when I hear that. Yes, you definitely can. Physically, you can. You can have a development app server PasoE running on the same machine as a production PasoE. There are just switches that decide whether it's started up in production modes, which means you have to open things up and you have to, decide what you want people to do. And the development one is wide open. So you can definitely run them on the same. You can run as many instances on a machine as you want in different configurations. So the answer is yes. Be careful.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so this is a question about moving to 12. So are there any, the question is, what is stopping us going directly to OpenEdge 12, the 12 series? And I think the answer is, let me just look at the notes because this one came in over email. So I'm going to flip back and forth and change my screen.
So I think there was a survey that asked people what's stopping them from moving to 12, and
yes.
I think that email had the answer was there's no app server.
Yes.
And there's no classic app server. So yes, that means you would have to learn the new PasoE app server. So there is that learning curve, but I think it's rather small. Like Mike said, converting your application from one to the other is fairly simple. We have people that have taken very large applications and in a few hours have them up and running on PasoE from the classic app server. From there on, you have to.
We've done a couple of workshops where people have brought their application and within a couple of hours have it executing. There's usually tuning work to do, to make it run as best as possible, but the actual port is usually really quick.
Okay. So someone has multiple applications and app servers on one server. Does the migration tool convert everything at once?
I think it's for each instance. So if you have AS Broker 1 and AS Broker 2, you'd run it against each one, right? So we don't have a tool that says, oh, build me all of these from one ubroker.properties. So when you use the PasProp conf, you say, build me the merge prop for AS Broker 1. Build me the merge prop for AS Broker 2. Build me the merge prop for web speed. So you'd have to run each of those. It'd be simple in a script to do that and get all the different files.
And then you could merge each one of them into the same instance.
All right, this one is looking.
If that was the question, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll see something in the chat or questions. So this one's looking for recommendations. So some of our classic app servers have global shared variables, handles, etc., shared by the entire app server application to support legacy code. Do you have any recommendations?
Mm-hmm. Global shared.
I think that's one more. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. I was just going to say, I think this is one we may have to have someone else.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd have to know more of the details, how they're sharing, why they're sharing.
Right.
Okay, no problem. We'll move on.
Okay. Yep.
If you're running,
again, if people want to reach out through email, we could definitely advise.
okay. So if you're running 11.6, is there a path for migration?
So what was in 11.6?
There's definitely a path. There's always two paths. You could move to 11.7, still using the classic app server, and then it's already all your code's already compiled for 11.7. You could just then spin up a PasoE instance and migrate it and have it running, or you could just bite the bullet and move directly to the PasoE in 12. Might be easier than going the middle step, 11.6 to 11.7 to 12.
Yeah, it really depends on your application.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, porting the application is basically just putting the R code in the right place.
Yep.
And flipping the switch, right? So it depends on how complex, what your database landscape looks like, things like that make it more complex. But yeah, you could easily you could update to 11.7, take that hit, and then jump to 12.
And of course, if you just move your PasoE to 12, it can still talk to an 11.6 database via network connections.
Right.
Right. And you could actually, if you had clients that were 11.6, I think they should be moved to 11.7, but they could talk to PasoE also. This is HTTP. I think that's all right, right, Mike? And 11.6 talking HTTP. So there's a lot of choices. Again, it depends on your application and your needs at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, there's a question on, let me just ask it this way. Do we need to buy the PasoE server, or is the app server license automatically upgraded when we move to 12?
So if you're asking, I have a classic app server and I want to go to PasoE, do I just get that at the same price? I don't think so. The Progress Application Server, PasoE, is a brand new product.
Different licensing model, right?
Yeah, different licensing. It's a different product, right? So we won't just give you a classic app server. I mean, a PasoE for a classic app server license. However, whatever you paid for the classic app server can be traded in towards the cost of the PasoE, right? Because this is one of my favorite lines is PasoE is not your classic app server. It's very, very different. So because it's a different product, you can use the classic app server as a trade-in. The full amount you paid for that will be given to you, but then the difference will have to be worked out with your salesperson. I hope that answered that question.
I saw it, thank you. So yes. But yes, definitely reach out to your account manager if there are questions. So there's a question on strategy for migration and upgrading. So what is the best strategy for upgrading 11.7 to 11.7 PasoE to 12?
So that's a really broad question. There's a bunch of really good content out there that has been produced by our content team. There's a quick start guide for PasoE, and there's a migration guide. There are a number of videos even that step through different types of applications and migrating them. I think I'd start with that documentation. Especially, I think the quick start guide good enough for 80% of what I've seen. And then all of the other content, the videos are really, really great.
True. And that's definitely where I would start if you're going from Classic to PasoE. But if you already have PasoE running in 11.7 and you're going to PasoE in 12.2, I think the hardest thing you have to do is recompile your code.
Was that the question?
I'm not sure.
If it's PasoE to PasoE, that's a different thing.
That's pretty easy. You just recompile your code and turn it back on. You should have move your properties. So yeah.
You may need to recreate your instance.
Oh, you definitely will. Yeah, I'd love to be able to tell you could just take that instance and plug it into 12.2 and it'll just work. But changes with security, changes with Tomcat, new features we've added make that impossible. So
yes.
And there is and I'm not a big expert on PDSOE, but if you have a project in the Progress Development Studio, and you're moving from 11 to 7, you can take that project and it will convert it to 12 for you. So, and again, don't ask me any questions about that. I just know they have that.
Okay, the next question is about memory leakage. So how does PasoE cope with memory leakage?
So I mentioned that leak detection tool. So the issue here is essentially, if you remember, the Classic App Server was the Classic agent could handle only one session at a time, and so any leaks there would be, let's say you had to leak this big, if you move that over to PasoE and you've got 100 sessions running in that same agent, multiply this by 100, and suddenly that leak looks big. So what we did is we tried to create tools that would let you identify those leaks. I mean, you don't want leaks in your application anyway, right? So we've given you the tools to try to track those down, and if you can do that before moving to PasoE, that's even better.
Right, but in PasoE we gave you some great tools. The memory leak checker in PasoE is heads and shoulders above the one in the Classic. The Classic one, you turned on logging and it would tell if you had any dynamic objects that were leaking. In PasoE, it gives you the dynamic objects, it gives you mem pointers, it gives you temp tables, it gives you most of the memory structures. And the nice thing is some of these leaks are hard to find in development, right? They're just hard to find. You need to have a lot of hits going on. With PasoE, that can be turned on and turned off selectively using the monitoring tools, the REST API and the OEJMX. So you can go get that information and go work on it, make those changes, and go back and do it again. So it's this iterative process about fixing those memory leaks. The problem with the Classic App Server, the Classic App Server allowed you to write code that might have leaked because we cleaned up the agents constantly, because we knew we were using a lot of memory for those agents, right, and CPU time. So we would clean them up.
We've
go ahead.
We've seen that with a lot of customers. They knew they had a bad leak, but every night they would just recycle their agents. Well, you can't really do that with PasoE in the same way, right? Because now instead of just recycling one session, you may have multiple concurrent running sessions, and so recycling a PasoE agent means you really have to understand what's going on with your application at the time that you recycle it.
Right, and which is why we added the ability to manually add an agent and trim an agent by saying,
so when it becomes idle, it goes away.
Right, or don't take any more, move everything to the other agent, and then, like you say, when it's idle. So there's we've given a lot of things because this was a prevalent problem early on. We've given a lot of tools to help people pass that. And maybe this is a good time to mention it. Mike and I have done a tips and tricks workshop moving from Classic to PasoE. It's 3 hours it goes through all of these things. It talks about converting. It gives you an overview of the structure of the two. I mean, we had a quick slide in here, but it spends a lot more time on it. Memory leaks, more on monitoring. I can't think of what else is in it, Mike, but it's 3 hours well worth, I think, your time to understand and learn PasoE.
Yeah, and we actually step through porting an actual application. You take a classic application and actually move it to PasoE during that session.
So and I'm hoping the plans are to do it online again here, maybe at the end of this year. So be on the lookout for that if you're interested.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is another question related to the memory leaks, so I'm going to ask it now. If I butcher this, because I know you guys have acronyms, and if I say it wrong, please forgive me. But is MPRO PAS use a lot of memory collecting stats? It's MPPRO APSV.
Yeah, that's the multi-session agent.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
MPRO APSV, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. So is there a way to have it automatically reset periodically, or do we have to script and schedule this ourselves?
Well, some of the stats are from beginning to end, right? So, and some of the stats can be gathered and then reset. There is a way to reset many of the metrics, but I don't know that it would reset everything, like total requests. I don't know that it would reset. I'd have to look at that. But there is a call that allows you to reset metrics. And of course, every time you restart an agent, then you would get new stats for that agent. So,
yeah, I think I don't remember exactly all of them, but I think most of them that actually tend to take up space, that actually have a record associated with them, those are all resettable, but not all the ones that are just counts are resettable, because a count won't eat up memory over time.
Okay. So why is the sizing or even sizing differences between PasoE Dev Server and PasoE Production Server important?
So there's a couple things, right? The reason why the development server only uses one agent and 5 connections is because you purchased it as a development server. So it only has enough connections to handle the development server. A production server will scale as big as you want it to based on your license. But the other problem we had was people had PasoE, they migrated their application and they're testing it real quick and saying, hey, this is terrible performance. I can't get more than 5 concurrent connections through. And that's because they had a development license. As soon as they got a production license, well, the performance test got much better. So just like the classic app server, when you bought a development classic app server, it had 2 agents, or basically two concurrent connections. And with PasoE, it has 1 agent and 5 connections. So you don't want to run a large application on a development server because it doesn't have the bandwidth to handle it. I think that's a question. Mike, did you get something different?
No, I think that's right. It's the development server's purposely limited.
Okay, so when running PAS in developer mode, does the code need to be compiled, or can it run the P files directly?
It can run the P files.
As long as you have a license that allows that, right? If you just put a PasoE production license on a machine, not by default, it won't be able to do it. But if you added
that's right.
A 4GL license, it would be able to do it.
You have to have a development license. Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I'm reading through all the questions. Trying to,
Are we answering them too quickly?
No. I'm trying to. They're coming in, and I'm trying to ask related ones together. So when people watch this replay, because I know that a lot of people have asked about it, that they make sense. So is PAS supported in a .NET Core environment, or just in .NET Framework, or like Classic App Server? I don't.
So are they asking about the actual doing a .NET client, or calling .NET code from PasoE?
Let me see if there's a follow-on question related.
I mean, we could answer a .NET client can connect to PasoE just like it could to the Classic App Server.
Yeah.
That still is supported. Running a .NET on PasoE might.
But right, yeah, as of right now, we can't. So, for example, if you have PasoE running on Linux, it can't call .NET.
But it can on Windows.
On Windows, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, just so.
I'll see if there's a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Because PasoE is based on Tomcat, is it possible to share deployment of services that we have to migrate from Classic and existent Java-based applications that already work?
I'm not sure I understand that. If they're asking whether or not they can have just a standard Tomcat web app hosted in PasoE, yeah, under the covers it's Tomcat, right? So if you know how to deploy standard web applications, that should work fine with PasoE.
The converse question we always get is, can I move PasoE into a Tomcat we already have running?
Right,
and the answer there is no. So you couldn't just take a PasoE application, ABL application, and deploy that into a regular Tomcat because we've done things to for security and things that are built in that aren't necessarily built in.
Yeah, we've customized session management and logging and things like that.
Right.
Class loading that you won't get with a standard Tomcat.
Right. But you should be able to run your standard Java web app or whatever inside our Tomcat in for PasoE. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've written your own servlet, your own Java servlet, and you want to deploy that in PasoE, yeah, it's just Tomcat.
So I think we have time for one or two more.
Okay.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. So let me ask this one. Is there some kind of automatic monitoring possibilities to know whether PasoE is up and running or not?
Yeah, that health checker we talked about is the nicest way to do that. We actually the customer request that we got that led to the health checker was being able to decide whether or not to take a PasoE instance out of service in the cloud. So the top level of that, without all the details, the top level of that is a URL that you hit, and if you get an HTTP 200 OK back, then your instance is okay. If you get a 500 back, then your instance is not well. It's not doing well. So you can get a yes no question right there.
All right, we still have time, so I'm gonna keep going.
Okay, super.
Does PasoE 12.2 support web speed apps?
Yeah, we supported web speed from the beginning.
Well, from 11.6, right? I don't think we had it. Was it 11.5 or 11.6 we had it? I know our first release we didn't support web speed.
That's right. The first release we didn't. Yeah.
And there are some caveats. Right now, we still don't support the mapped web objects.
Yeah.
Where you were writing HTML and 4GL separately, and you had this tool that converted one field in the HTML to a field in the ABL. So.
Yeah. But the kind of standard web speed apps, yes.
Right, and just to go back to what Mike said about web handlers, we have customers who have moved their web speed, their classic web speed, into PasoE, and are now taking parts of it and slowly rewriting everything in the web handlers because of the advantage of that application.
Yeah, the web handler architecture is much more powerful.
All right, I'm keeping a close eye on the time. Let's go for one more.
Sure.
So is there a minimum, or what is the minimum EC2 instance size recommendation for running PasoE in development and in production?
Wow, I wouldn't. The problem is whenever we say this, we're wrong. I've run a PasoE instance in the cloud on one of the free tiers, which is a very small Linux. Is that very fast? Can it handle a lot of load? No, but you can run in it. It's very small and compact, especially compared to the classic app server where you had an admin server, you had a different, a web server you had to run, possibly the name server. So I guess we put a lot of so as small as possible you can run, at least run. Would it be fast? No. But when it gets to tuning your machine and how big you are, we have at least 2 documents out there. One that said how I had to build machine sizes up for the ATM. That's out there. So, and then one about how to do tuning, which is where you keep adding more a load until you get to a point on the machine. You go, okay, it's time to go to a bigger machine. So that's the part that really takes a lot of time, not the migration, but making sure you have a big enough machine to handle your application.
And for a development instance, you might be able to get away with something a lot smaller. You know, if performance, during development, if performance is not the key thing, then you could get by with something much smaller.
I hope that answered the question. If not, let us know.
I'm sure someone will get back to us. But we're almost at the top of the hour, and I'm afraid that we're going to run out of time if we ask another question. So why don't we take a pause and thank everyone for joining us today. I know that there are a lot of questions we did not get to. We'll compile them all and try to get back to you guys either one-on-one or I saw a bunch of questions that came in over my email. We'll follow up with Roy and with Mike. And I wanted to thank you guys both for your time today. And thanks everyone for joining us.
You're welcome.
We hope you had fun and have a great day.
Yes.
Thanks.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.